I want to talk to you tonight, friend, about something people don't usually talk about. Not because it isn't important, but because it makes people uncomfortable. It sits in that quiet corner of grief where there are no right sentences and no good advice. It's about the clothes. I know that sounds small, almost silly even, compared to everything else you lose when your spouse dies. Clothes seem like the least of it. But grief has a way of hiding in ordinary places. It slips into drawers and closets. It waits patiently behind doors you don't open anymore. After my wife passed, people checked on me the way they're supposed to. They brought food. They spoke softly. They said her name carefully, like it might break if handled too roughly. And every one of them left with a sense that they had done something useful. But when the door closed and the house settled back into its own breathing, there was one room I avoided more than any other: the bedroom. Not the bed at first. That was hard, yes, but sleep eventually claims you whether you're ready or not. No, it was the closet that stopped me in my tracks, her side of it especially. Everything still arranged just the way she liked it. Colors grouped together, dresses spaced evenly, shoes lined up with quiet dignity, as if they were waiting for instructions that would never come. The first time I opened that door after she died, I didn't step inside. I just stood there, hand still on the knob, like I had interrupted something private. You don't expect clothes to feel so present, but they do. They carry the shape of a life. Sleeves bend where arms once moved. Collars remember necks. Pockets still hold lint, old receipts, sometimes a forgotten coin, proof that the person who wore them existed in ordinary, careless ways. I closed the door again almost immediately. People started asking questions not long after that. Practical questions, well-meaning ones. Have you gone through her things yet? What are you planning to do with her clothes? They asked the way someone asks if you've taken the trash out, as if it were just another chore on the list. I smiled and said, "Not yet." What I meant was, I don't know how. What I meant was, I'm afraid of what will happen to me if I do. Grief does funny things to time. Days stretch, weeks collapse. Some moments feel sharp and immediate, others distant and unreal. And the clothes, well, they seemed frozen in a moment that no longer existed. Touching them felt like touching the past with bare hands. One afternoon, I needed a jacket. The weather had turned colder without asking my permission. I reached for the closet out of habit, then stopped. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the door like it might speak first. When I finally opened it, I didn't look at her clothes right away. I focused on my own things, my shirts, my jackets, familiar territory, safe ground. But grief is curious. It wanders. My eyes drifted, and suddenly I was looking at one of her cardigans, the soft one, the one with the loose button she always meant to fix but never did. I reached for it before I could talk myself out of it. The fabric felt warmer than I expected. That's when it hit me. Not like a punch, like a wave, slow, heavy. I sat down right there on the edge of the bed, cardigan in my hands, and let myself feel everything I had been holding back. I cried for the way she used to hum while folding laundry. I cried because this sweater would never be worn again, and because part of me wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, it could be. When the tears finally slowed, I noticed something important. The pain hadn't destroyed me. It had passed through me. That was my first lesson, though I didn't recognize it as one at the time. I just knew that I was still there, still breathing, still able to sit with the ache without breaking apart completely. I put the cardigan back carefully, not because I was done, but because that was enough for one day. That's something I want you to hear clearly, friend. One day at a time isn't just a saying, it's a survival method, especially when it comes to the things they leave behind. There is a strange pressure people put on grief to be efficient, to move forward, to clean up, to deal with things. But love isn't efficient, and loss certainly isn't tidy. A few weeks later, someone offered to help me go through her clothes. They said it kindly, genuinely. I thanked them and changed the subject. I wasn't ready for witnesses. I needed to meet that closet alone, on my own terms. When I finally did start, it wasn't with a plan. There were no piles labeled keep and donate, no boxes by the door. I simply opened the closet and stood there, breathing, letting my body tell me what it could handle. Some pieces were impossible. I didn't touch them. Others felt neutral, almost anonymous, just fabric, just things. And a few, just a few, felt like they were asking to be held. I learned to listen to that feeling. Grief speaks quietly. If you rush, you miss it. There were days I could only manage one item. I'd take it out, sit with it, remember where she wore it last, and then put it back. That wasn't failure. That was practice. You wouldn't expect yourself to lift something heavy without training first. Why expect that of your heart? At some point, I noticed that my language shifted. I stopped thinking, what should I do with her clothes? And started thinking, what feels right today? That change matters more than it sounds like it does. One morning, I folded a blouse she hadn't worn in years. It was nice, but it wasn't her favorite. I realized as I held it that my attachment to it was more about guilt than love. Guilt for even considering letting go. Guilt for surviving. Guilt for moving forward when she could not. I folded it neatly and placed it in a box, not to erase her, not to forget her, but to acknowledge that not everything needs to stay for love to remain. Another day, I found a scarf I had given her decades earlier. She wore it until it was threadbare. I laughed out loud when I saw it, remembering how stubborn she was about keeping it. That scarf went back into the closet, right where it belonged. And that's the thing people don't understand. Letting go of some things doesn't mean letting go of the person. Keeping others doesn't mean you're stuck. Grief is not an all-or-nothing arrangement. It's a series of small, personal negotiations. Friend, if you're listening to this and you're standing in front of that same closet, wondering what kind of person you'll be on the other side of it, let me tell you something gently. There is no version of this where you do it wrong. You can keep everything for now. You can give some away. You can do nothing at all for months, even years. None of that diminishes what you shared. None of it disrespects the life you built together. The clothes are not a test. They're just echoes. And echoes don't disappear when you demand they do. They fade when the space is ready. I remember the first time I donated a box. I didn't feel relief the way people said I would. I felt quiet, thoughtful, a little sad, a little proud. Mostly, I felt like I had taken a step without knowing exactly where it led. That's how healing often works, not with certainty, but with willingness. As time went on, the closet changed, not physically at first, but emotionally. It stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a memory room, a place I could visit without bleeding. I could open the door without bracing myself. I could touch things without losing my balance. That didn't mean I missed her less. It meant my grief had softened its grip. And friend, that softening doesn't come from forcing yourself to move on. It comes from allowing yourself to move through. If you've made it this far with me, if these words are stirring something familiar, you're not alone in it.
A lot of us carry these quiet questions without ever saying them out loud. You're welcome to share your own experience if you feel ready. And if these late-night talks help you feel a little less alone, you can stay with us here at Wisdom Through Time. I'll keep talking as long as you keep listening, because there's more to say about the clothes, about what they teach us, about how love learns to live in new places.
Now, friend, something changes when time has had a chance to sit with you for a while. Not fix things, not explain them, just sit, like an old companion who doesn't feel the need to fill the silence. That's what happened with the clothes. They stopped feeling like a question I had to answer and started feeling like a conversation I could return to when I was ready. Some days I'd open the closet and feel nothing at all. Other days, a single sleeve or collar would stop me cold, and I'd have to close the door again. Both kinds of days were honest. Both kinds were allowed. One evening, I noticed something small but important. I had started borrowing from her side of the closet without thinking about it. A scarf here, a sweater there. Not to pretend she was still around, but because those things carried comfort, familiarity. They reminded my body of a time when being held was effortless. I wondered, briefly, if that meant I was holding on too tightly. Then I laughed at myself. At my age, friend, you learn that holding on and letting go aren't opposites, they're partners. You do both at the same time, just in different places. I wore one of her sweaters on a cold morning while making coffee. It smelled faintly like her detergent, though I hadn't used it in months. As I stood there, mug warming my hands, I realized something quietly remarkable. I wasn't pretending she was still alive. I was remembering that she had been. That distinction matters more than most people realize. There's a fear people carry, especially early in grief, that if they let go of the objects, they'll lose the memories, that love will thin out, that the past will slip away unnoticed. But memory doesn't live in fabric, it lives in you. The clothes are just reminders, not containers. They don't hold the love hostage, they just point toward it. One afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't planned. I invited my daughter over, not to help me sort exactly, just to be there. She knew better than to rush me. She always did. We stood in the bedroom together, looking at the closet. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, she reached for a dress, one I remembered well. My wife wore it to a family dinner years ago. Burned the roast that night, laughed about it for weeks. My daughter smiled softly and said, "I remember this one." That's when it hit me. The clothes weren't just my memories, they were bridges between generations, between moments, between people who loved the same person in different ways. We didn't make decisions that day, we just shared stories, one dress at a time. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we went quiet. Sometimes we closed the closet and sat at the table instead. That was work too. Grief isn't always about action. Sometimes it's about witness. Later on, when I did begin giving more things away, I did it differently than people suggested. I didn't dump everything at once. I didn't make a grand declaration that I was moving on. I let items leave in their own season. A coat went to someone who needed it more than I did. A pair of shoes found their way to a charity she once supported. I didn't announce it. I didn't seek permission. I just let it happen. Each time, I noticed how my body reacted. Tightness meant wait. Ease meant proceed. I learned to trust that language more than any advice. And then there were the things that stayed. A blouse folded carefully in a drawer, a scarf tucked away like a pressed flower in a book, Not for display, not for proof, just because. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop asking yourself what you should do and start honoring what you feel ready to do. Friend, I want to tell you something plainly because it took me a long time to understand it. You don't owe anyone a timeline. Not your family, not your friends, not the world that keeps moving as if nothing happened. Loss rearranges your sense of urgency. What once felt important suddenly isn't. What seemed small now carries weight. The clothes become symbols, not because they're special, but because they're tangible. You can touch them, fold them, give them away. In a situation where so much is out of your control, they feel like something you can finally decide. But decision doesn't have to mean finality. I kept a box in the back of the closet for a long time. No label, just a box. It held things I wasn't ready to place anywhere else. Not keep, not give away, just hold. That box taught me patience. Months passed, then years. Eventually, I opened it one day and found myself surprised by what no longer hurt. Some items had lost their charge. The memory was still there, but the sting was gone. Those things were ready. Others weren't, and that was fine too. You see, healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being afraid of the feeling. There came a moment, much later, when I stood in front of the closet and realized something else had changed. I wasn't asking, "What do I do with her clothes?" anymore. I was asking, "How do I want to remember this part of my life?" That's a very different question. One invites pressure, the other invites care. Friend, if you're listening to this late at night, standing in that quiet space between memory and motion, I want you to hear this in the softest way possible. You are not behind. You are not doing it wrong. You are not weak for hesitating. Love doesn't disappear just because a closet looks different, and it doesn't stay alive just because you keep every sweater. Love lives in the way you speak their name, in the way you pause when you pass a place you once went together, in the way certain songs still find you when you least expect them. The clothes are just one chapter. Eventually, I found myself with more empty hangers than full ones. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel loss all over again. Instead, I felt space, not emptiness, space. Room for new memories, room for quiet, room for a version of myself I was still becoming. And every now and then, I still open that drawer with the scarf. I touch it. I smile. I close it again. That's enough. If you take anything from this conversation, friend, let it be this. You don't have to be brave. You don't have to be decisive. You just have to be honest with yourself. Open the closet when you're ready. Close it when you're not. The love you shared doesn't live there anymore. It lives in you, and it always will.